The biological infrastructure of the human brain is receiving a massive structural upgrade. Blood-based biomarkers are replacing invasive diagnostics, monoclonal antibodies are clearing neural latency, and digital twins are transitioning neuromedicine from reactive treatment to proactive patch management. Welcome to a special edition rundown. I am your host, Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Noumen, senior software engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on cognitive asset preservation and the next phase of the Alzheimer's fight this Wednesday, June 3rd, 2026. For decades, Alzheimer's disease has been an unsolvable memory leak crisis within human biological hardware. But the paradigm is officially shifting. The transition from expensive, inaccessible PET scans to highly scalable blood tests, specifically those measuring the p-tau217 biomarker, means we can now detect structural degradation a full decade before cognitive symptoms manifest. Simultaneously, the therapeutic pipeline is delivering. Monoclonal antibodies are actively clearing toxic amyloid plaques from the brain, while global platforms like the Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative are utilizing machine learning to break down institutional research silos. We are no longer just managing decline, we are actively engineering cognitive preservation. Before we dive into the data, I have a brief strategic request. The algorithms governing the app you are listening on right now dictate what intelligence reaches your feed. To ensure you never miss our most critical forensic autopsies, please hit follow or subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Let's unravel the science.
When you think about your brain, you probably just picture this squishy, mysterious organ.
Right. The thing driving your thoughts and holding all your memories.
Yeah, exactly. Basically housing your entire personality. But for a moment, I really want you to completely change that frame.
Okay. How so?
What if you think of your brain as a biological server? Like a highly specialized, incredibly dense piece of hardware.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, running constantly, 24/7, under some of the most rigid physical and metabolic constraints imaginable.
And, any systems engineer will tell you that a complex server running under those kinds of conditions is, well, it's inherently vulnerable to hardware degradation.
Exactly.
It is entirely susceptible to memory leaks, processing latency, and eventually total system failure.
Right. And today, the mission for this deep dive is to perform a forensic, data-driven autopsy on the next phase of the war against Alzheimer's disease.
It's a massive topic.
It is. We are pulling apart a huge stack of research, clinical trial data, and strategic briefings to map out exactly where the science stands right now.
And to do that properly, we really have to fundamentally shift our perspective. We have to stop viewing Alzheimer's merely as this, inevitable medical tragedy.
Like it's just a sad part of aging.
Precisely. The data demands that we analyze it as a severe memory leak and hardware latency crisis within that human biological server you mentioned.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because we are currently witnessing a massive transition in neuromedicine. We are moving away from reactive symptom management.
Where the goal was basically just to make people comfortable as they declined, right?
Right. And we are moving toward proactive patch management.
Wow, okay.
This involves leveraging computational biology, decentralized open source data, and highly advanced blood-based biomarkers to actually debug the human brain.
Okay, let's unpack this because, if you want to manage a server's hardware degradation, the absolute first thing you need is a highly sensitive diagnostic tool.
You have to know what's wrong before you fix it.
Exactly. You need to know the hardware is failing before the server actually crashes. And crucially, you need a tool that doesn't require you to tear the machine completely apart just to see what's going wrong.
And historically, diagnosing this kind of neural latency required incredibly late-stage invasive diagnostic hardware.
We're talking about PT scans, right?
Yes. Positron emission tomography. And these are massive, highly specialized machines that cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per scan.
That's a huge barrier.
It is. Or, even worse, doctors had to perform a lumbar puncture to analyze cerebrospinal fluid, basically a spinal tap.
Yeah, and neither of those are tests a doctor's just going to order casually for you, just because you forgot your keys one morning.
Not at all.
You only get a spinal tap or a $10,000 scan when your biological server has already suffered irreversible damage. Like, you're already showing severe symptoms.
But what's fascinating here is that there is a massive macroeconomic shift happening right now. We are seeing the rapid emergence of fluid biomarkers.
Fluid biomarkers, meaning blood tests.
Exactly. Specifically, plasma-based biomarkers like pTau-217.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. There is a new diagnostic technology rolling out called Simoa.
Simoa.
Right. It stands for Single Molecule Array Digital Immunoassay. And without getting totally bogged down in the chemistry, what this technology does is allow us to quantify this specific biomarker pTau-217 in normal peripheral blood
Okay.
at sub-picogram concentrations.
Hold on, sub-picogram. I know we're talking about microscopic levels here, but give us a sense of scale for that. Just how sensitive is this test?
So imagine taking a single tiny grain of sugar
Okay.
and dissolving it completely into an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Wow.
A sub-picogram assay can detect that specific grain of sugar.
That is just wild.
It is. By leveraging these highly specialized antibodies, we can detect the upstream driver of the disease, the amyloid beta deposition that eventually leads to those toxic tau tangles in the brain.
And how early can we catch it?
We can detect it 15 to 20 years before you ever manifest a single clinical cognitive deficit.
Wait, really? 20 years?
Yes, up to 2 decades before the clinical symptoms show up.
And the cost of this blood test?
Around $200 to $300.
Just think about the difference there. I mean, this is the equivalent of having to completely disassemble your car's engine to find a microfracture versus just, plugging a $200 scanner into the dashboard and getting a highly accurate check engine code.
A full decade before the engine actually blows up.
Exactly.
And that dashboard analogy highlights why this is completely altering the economics of clinical trials, too.
Oh, because the trials themselves have historically been a huge bottleneck, right?
Exactly. Previously, to find just 100 trial participants who were actually positive for amyloid plaques, meaning they had the underlying pathology to test a drug on clinical teams, had to run those expensive, low-throughput PET scans on about 536 candidates.
Wow, so scanning hundreds of people just to find 100 who qualify.
Right. It could take 3 entire years just to enroll enough people for a study.
But now you use that pTau-217 blood test as a primary triage filter.
Yes.
You screen thousands of people quickly and cheaply. So to get those same 100 positive participants, you only need to run confirmatory P scans on about 124 people.
Which shrinks the trial enrollment timeline from over 3 years down to under 12 months.
That's a massive acceleration. We've decoupled the fluid diagnostic from the invasive neuroimaging. We can finally screen at scale.
We can.
But wait, getting the check engine code is only half the battle, right? Now that we have this incredible early warning system to detect the memory leak, what happens next? How do we actually execute the structural reset of the neural pathways? Like, how do we apply the patch to the server?
So the primary therapeutic blueprint right now relies on targeted proteopathic clearance.
Okay. Using what?
Using monoclonal antibodies. The 2 major players discussed in all the clinical data right now are lecanemab and donanemab.
And what exactly do they do?
They are designed to physically enter the brain and actively clear the neurotoxic protein aggregates.
So they basically act as the actual biological cleanup crew.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
they have slightly different targets, which is interesting.
Oh.
Lecanemab binds selectively to soluble amyloid beta protofibrils.
Okay, to keep our server analogy going, I guess you could think of protofibrils as the corrupted code circulating in the RAM before it compiles into a solid permanent blockage.
That's a great way to put it. Donanemab, on the other hand, targets established consolidated plaques to dissolve them.
So it goes after the hardened, solidified code clogging up the hard drive.
Precisely. And the clinical efficacy of these drugs is measurable, but it is modest.
How modest are we talking?
Well, lecanemab slows clinical cognitive decline by about 27% over an 18-month treatment course.
Okay, 27%. But here is where we need to look really closely at the mechanics, because the physiological overhead for applying this patch is severe.
It's very severe.
You're mechanically clearing vascular amyloid from the brain. But how does that actually work? Because from what I'm seeing in the sources, pulling those proteins out physically weakens the blood-brain barrier.
It does.
And that triggers a major side effect called ARIA, right? Amyloid-related imaging abnormalities.
Yeah, ARIA. It is a violent microscopic process. The amyloid plaques aren't just floating freely in empty space. They actually embed themselves into the walls of the blood vessels in the brain.
Oh, wow.
So when these antibodies attack and dissolve those plaques, it leaves micro tears in the vascular walls. The blood-brain barrier becomes physically porous.
That sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. That presents as ARIA. It can cause generalized brain swelling, which is known as ARIE, or actual microhemorrhaging tiny bleeds in the brain known as ARAH.
Tiny bleeds in the brain. How common is this?
With donanemab, ARIE occurred in roughly 20 to 24% of treated patients.
A quarter of the patients got brain swelling.
Yeah, and serious, potentially fatal swelling events happen in about 1.5% of donanemab patients and 3% of lecanemab patients.
So the biological firmware update inherently risks damaging the actual hardware it's trying to save.
Yes, that is the harsh reality.
And on top of that physical risk, the financial costs are just staggering. I mean, the base drug cost for lecanemab is around $26,500 a year.
Just for the drug itself.
Right. But the true cost to the healthcare system actually exceeds $35,000 annually per patient, because you have to factor in the constant infusion administration and the intense medical monitoring required just to make sure their brain isn't bleeding.
Which forces the clinical community to ask a vital question. If the physical and financial cost of mechanically scrubbing the brain is that dangerous, can we bypass the brain entirely?
Right. Can we just find a backdoor through the general immune system?
Exactly. Can we just improve the body's overall systemic metabolic health to protect the neural network?
So let's talk about the EVOKE trials. Novo Nordisk ran this massive phase 3 trial using oral semaglutide.
Right.
And for anyone listening, that is a GLP-1 drug. It's the same class of medication that has become wildly famous for systemic weight loss and treating diabetes.
Yes, Ozempic, Wegovy, all of those.
Right. So they tested it on over 3,800 patients with early-stage Alzheimer's. The theory was, if you fix the body's metabolism, you protect the brain.
It was a huge swing.
And the result?
Yeah.
A 0% reduction in cognitive decline. It failed entirely.
But the forensic breakdown of that failure is incredibly revealing about human biology.
How so?
Systemically, the drug did exactly what it was supposed to do. It had a massive anti-inflammatory effect on the body.
Right. The data showed that high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is a major inflammation marker, dropped by 30% across the trial cohort.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? I want to make sure I understand this. If we look at the EVOKE trial, we successfully cooled down the entire server room. The systemic inflammation dropped by 30%.
Right.
But the motherboard itself was still melting.
Yeah.
Why? If the body is healthier, why does the brain keep degrading? Does this prove that the blood-brain barrier is actually acting like a firewall that blocks our own systemic upgrades?
It proves exactly that. It shows that central neural protection and systemic health are deeply divorced once late-stage pathology begins.
Interesting.
The blood-brain barrier is indeed a firewall, and the semaglutide essentially failed to penetrate it. The cerebrospinal fluid-to-plasma ratio of the drug was a minuscule 0.4%.
0.4%. So the drug was circulating all through the body, but it just wasn't reaching the brain.
Exactly. Furthermore, peripheral blood markers of actual nerve damage like neurofilament light chain, or NFL, went up by 5 to 7% during the trial.
So the hardware was still actively degrading, despite the body losing weight and reducing inflammation.
The metabolic pathways alone are structurally insufficient to alter the trajectory once actual proteopathic hardware degradation has commenced.
Basically, you can't just diet, exercise, or metabolize your way out of structural brain damage once the amyloid and tau proteins have taken hold.
You simply cannot.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. We have an affordable, highly sensitive blood diagnostic. We can catch the memory leak a decade early.
Right.
And we have a functional, albeit physically risky and expensive biological patch in the form of these monoclonal antibodies.
Yes.
But if you zoom out, there is a terrifying macroeconomic bottleneck here. If we actually try to deploy this patch globally to everyone who needs it, the health system infrastructure will literally crash.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the severe ARIA safety profile we just outlined requires extreme, constant surveillance.
It's not just taking a pill.
Not at all. The FDA mandates intense MRI monitoring for any patient on lecanemab. A patient doesn't just get an IV drip and go home.
Right.
They need a baseline MRI before starting, plus serial safety MRIs prior to their 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 14th infusions.
Wait, that is 5 high-resolution 3T MRI scans within the first 14 weeks of treatment, just to monitor for brain bleeds.
Yes, and there are 7 million Americans currently living with Alzheimer's.
Oh, wow.
If just 5% of that population were prescribed this treatment, the sheer demand for serial monitoring would completely saturate our existing regional neuroimaging capacity.
That's unbelievable.
We are talking about injecting almost 2 million additional MRI scans into a system that is already completely backlogged. It would delay MRIs for strokes, for tumors, for spinal injuries. It would gridlock acute medical care across the board.
Think about the supply chain paradox you are facing as a patient right now. We are telling you to get screened early, go get the $200 blood test.
Right.
But commercial insurance payers, Aetna, Cigna, Anthem, they currently classify these pTau217 tests as experimental for asymptomatic people.
Yes, they won't cover it.
Your insurance won't pay for the blood test until you are already showing cognitive decline. But as we just established, once you show symptoms, the hardware damage is already done.
Exactly.
We have built a multi-lane, high-speed highway for diagnosing this disease, but we put a single manual toll booth right in the middle of it.
It's a profound structural mismatch. The diagnostic technology has vastly outpaced the payer infrastructure and the clinical delivery capacity.
So if the current patches require unscalable MRI monitoring, how do we engineer safer drugs that don't cause brain bleeds?
The answer to that always comes back to data. We need massive global data sets to understand the biology on a much deeper level.
But here's the problem with that. You can't just email millions of raw patient medical records around the world. You instantly hit massive privacy and compliance walls, like IPA in the US or GDPR in Europe.
This is where decentralized data architecture completely changes the game.
Also,
The Alzheimer's Disease Data Initiative, or ADDI, built something called the Federated and Distributed Data Sharing Appliance.
the FDSA.
Right. Instead of trying to centralize all this global medical data into one giant vulnerable database, they leave the data exactly where it is.
Here's where it gets really interesting for the listener.
Yeah.
Instead of risking a data breach by moving all the gold out of the vault, you are essentially sending a robot into the vault.
Exactly.
The robot counts the gold, does all the math, and then simply slides a piece of paper under the door with the final tally. The gold never actually leaves the room.
That is a highly functional way to describe a Dockerized container environment.
Right.
The FDSA deploys a Level 2 virtual appliance directly onto a local hospital or institution's private server. Researchers from across 125 countries can query these remote datasets globally.
So they ask the question from afar.
Yes. The appliance processes the complex computations locally behind the hospital's firewall. The local institution reviews the query, and only the aggregate, anonymized, approved mathematical results are released back to the researcher's airlocked workspace.
It is brilliant. It completely bypasses the privacy roadblock. Nobody's personal medical identity is ever exposed, but the global scientific community can still learn from their biology.
It's a huge leap forward.
But what is the ultimate output of all this federated multi-omic data? What are we actually building with it?
We're building a digital twin.
Right, the ability to build predictive, patient-specific simulations of your brain's decay.
This represents the true paradigm shift in neuromedicine. We are looking at a framework called cognitive twin. It moves away from looking at simple averages and instead relies on deep Markov models.
Let's translate that out of the math jargon. Think of a deep Markov model, kind of like advanced weather forecasting. It looks at the visible weather outside right now, which would be your current clinical biomarkers, to mathematically deduce the invisible atmospheric pressure building up behind the scenes, which is your hidden underlying disease state.
That's exactly how it works. And when researchers trained this specific architecture on the tadpole dataset, which tracked over 1,600 patients over time, it yielded a 47.5% improvement in prediction error for 24-month cognitive scores compared to older models.
47% better. That's massive.
And it was incredibly resilient to real-world messy data. Even if you randomly deleted 15% of the clinical data points, the prediction error only degraded by 0.3%.
So it doesn't break just because a patient missed a single blood test or appointment.
Precisely. And it solves a major issue in systems biology called parameter identifiability.
What's that?
Well, often, complex AI models can spit out the exact same trajectory from vastly different data points, which basically masks the individual's actual biological reality. The AI basically guesses an average.
Oh, I see.
But cognitive twin uses identifiability-guided assessment. It ensures the AI is mapping your specific biological variability, not just population averages.
So the AI is acting as the orchestrator, managing the flow of global knowledge.
Right. The enforcer, testing hypotheses strictly under your unique biological constraints, and the architect designing alternative causal models.
It's moving neurology away from noisy guessing and toward proactive, simulated trial runs of different drug dosages on a virtual replica of your brain.
Exactly.
Let's pause on that, because this leads to a wild strategic signal in the briefing. We're talking about corporate neurosurveillance.
Yes.
The data suggests that by 2028 or 2029, routine corporate physicals for senior executives will mandate this kind of blood-based neural tracking.
It's coming very soon.
Think about the implications of that. If a company uses your biological digital twin to forecast that your cognitive processing speed is going to significantly degrade in 36 months, are you suddenly a depreciating corporate asset?
It's a very real concern.
Will you be passed over for a promotion or even fired because a mathematical model predicts a memory leak? That feels like dystopian sci-fi, but the data says we are literally just a few years away from this being a reality.
The financial sector is already preparing for this. Venture capital and private equity are actively shifting their investments away from broad metabolic interventions and pouring massive capital into precision neurology infrastructure.
So they see the writing on the wall.
They are funding high-throughput blood assays, specialized rapid MRI centers, and these federated machine learning platforms. They recognize that cognitive asset preservation is going to be a massive, massive industry.
So if we pull all of this together, the war on Alzheimer's is no longer just a biological mystery. It is a computational, infrastructural, and logistical battle.
Absolutely.
The human brain is a server that we finally have the software to debug, even if the current hardware patches come with severe physical risks and heavy resource demands.
And this raises an important question. If we synthesize the trajectory of these diagnostic tools and the severe limitations of our medical infrastructure, we arrive at a very challenging psychological horizon.
How so? What are we facing as individuals?
We're rapidly approaching an era of perfect diagnostic clarity. Within a very short window of time, a simple $200 blood test combined with an AI digital twin could perfectly predict the exact year your cognitive decline will begin.
Right.
But if the macroeconomic bottlenecks are not solved, if we still have severe MRI shortages, massive out-of-pocket costs, and insurance gaps that classify preventative care as experimental, what is the psychological toll of possessing crystal clear knowledge of your own neural decay while being completely locked out of the biological firmware updates needed to stop it?
That concludes our special forensic briefing. The strategic signal for today is the operational timeline for neural tracking. As blood-based biomarkers like p-tau217 become cheap and scalable, we are approaching a structural tipping point in executive healthcare. Within the next 3 to 5 years, routine corporate physicals and high-performance longevity portfolios will mandate baseline neural tracking. Just as we monitor cardiovascular lipid panels today, tracking the structural integrity of your brain's biological hardware will become a standard metric of executive retention. We are entering an era where cognitive decline is no longer an inevitable systemic failure, but a trackable, manageable, and preventable data point. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, check the show notes for the AI Executive Toolkit. And as a special bonus for our community, we have exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and my AI and Machine Learning Tutor Pro apps. You can find the links to claim those directly in the show notes below. Subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.